After its release, Metroid on the NES was considered a success by Nintendo and by 2004 had sold over 2 million copies, with many praising its visuals and gameplay. 5 years later, Nintendo released the sequel on the extremely popular Game Boy titled Metroid II: Return of Samus, a game which many believe to be the weakest game in the series. That's quite a claim to make, and we're going to see just how true it is. But first, some history. Development for Metroid 2 began sometime after the release of the first game, but how long exactly is unclear. But like before, Gunpei Yokoi was once again the producer, with Hiroji Kiyotake as one of the directors, this time joined by Hiroyuki Kimura, who was a character designer for Super Mario Bros. 3. For some reason, Yoshio Sakamoto wasn't involved in this game's development at all, and I couldn't find an exact reason for that. And Hirokazu Tanaka didn't return to compose the music for this game either, with that role being filled by Ryoji Yoshitome. Instead of the NES, Metroid 2 was developed for the Game Boy. Again, I couldn't find an exact reason for this, but perhaps the popularity of the Game Boy may have had an influence on this decision. The team introduced a number of new power-ups and gameplay mechanics that would become series staples, such as crouching, the ability to shoot down, new beam and exploration power-ups, save stations, and recharge stations. This game also introduced the rounded shoulder plates for Samus's Varia suit because unlike the last game where the suit changed color, the Game Boy didn't have a colored screen, so they introduced this change to help players differentiate between the two suits. However, this was later fixed with the Game Boy Color and the Super Game Boy add-on for the Super Nintendo. Unlike the original Metroid, which at least had a small amount of story at the title screen, Metroid 2 has nothing of the sort here, so once again we have to look to the manual. After Samus' successful mission on planet Zebes, the Galactic Federation becomes worried about the presence of Metroids because the pirates showed them just how dangerous they can be. The Federation sends a research vessel to SR-388 to confirm that no more Metroids exist there, but the ship goes missing. The Federation sends a search and rescue to the planet, but they also go missing. Again, the Federation can't even sneeze without something happening to them. Anyway, the Federation is certain that this means that Metroids are still on the planet, so they once again hire Samus and give her the mission to exterminate every Metroid on the planet. That's quite the task, but like before, Samus accomplishes the mission and destroys every Metroid on SR-388. Mostly. After defeating the Metroid Queen, Samus comes across an egg that hatches a baby Metroid who thinks that Samus is its mother. Samus can't bring herself to kill it, so she instead takes it with her where she delivers it to the Federation, an event which leads directly into Super Metroid. In regards to how Samus controls in this game, she plays very similar to how she did in the original. However, this time she has both the ability to crouch and shoot down while in the air, both of which are great additions because it makes dealing with certain threats much easier. In addition, Samus now begins her journey with the Morph Ball, 30 missiles, and the Long Beam already equipped. Additionally, every piece of equipment present in the original game returns in this one. This includes the Ice Beam, the Wave Beam, High Jump Boots, the Varia Suit, and the Screw Attack. But there's still plenty of new items for Samus to discover. The Morph Ball sees its own share of upgrades this time, which include the Spring Ball and the Spider Ball. The Spring Ball allows Samus to jump in Morph Ball form, which basically eliminates the need to use bombs to jump, though you could still do that if you like. And the Spider Ball allows Samus to stick to any non-hazardous surface. It's definitely a useful ability, but one that's also annoying because for some reason it'll randomly change its directional inputs. Like at first I could be using left and right on the D-pad to move, but then it'll just change to up and down for no reason, and I have no idea what causes this. This game introduces two new beam power-ups, the Spazer Beam and the Plasma Beam. The Spazer Beam shoots 3 beams at once, while the Plasma Beam fires one powerful shot. Something kind of odd about both beams is that in this game at least, they both travel through walls just like the Wave Beam, which you would think would make the Wave Beam useless. But actually I like the Spazer Beam the least. Yeah, it shoots 3 shots, but maybe it's just me, but I found the Wave Beam the stronger of the two. And the Plasma Beam became my favorite because of just how powerful it is. It fires slower than all the others, but the power more than makes up for it. The only downside is that once again, Samus can only carry one beam at a time, so if you start getting bored with your current beam, you'll have to backtrack to get the one you want. Thankfully, there is an area that contains all of the beams, so it's a little bit better handled than the original game at least. And finally, we have the Space Jump, which allows Samus to continuously jump in mid-air as long as you rhythmatically press the jump button. I love this ability because it makes certain sections much easier to manage and can help you correct an otherwise bad jump. And then of course you have energy and missile expansions to collect, which I highly recommend doing, and I'll explain why later. In addition to items to discover, this game comes equipped with save points, which are a nice change from the previous password system, and energy and missile recharge stations. While not super plentiful, these are a nice addition because if you can find them, it saves on time spent farming energy and missiles from enemies, although that can still sometimes happen. Now, gameplay was entirely non-linear in the original Metroid and semi-non-linear in Zero Mission. Metroid II, in a sense, uses a similar type of progression to the one seen in Zero Mission minus the Chozo statues telling you where you should be headed. And instead of power-ups to a certain extent, your progression is instead hampered by lava blockage. And that's where the entire point of this game comes into play, the Metroids. You see, in order to make progress in this game, you have to destroy all 39 Metroids on SR388. Based on what was seen in the original game, that doesn't seem like the most daunting task, especially since you get the Ice Beam fairly early. However, once you come across your first Metroid, you'll see that they're beginning to evolve. And while this evolution removes their weakness to the Ice Beam, you can now just shoot them immediately with missiles and then they're done. By defeating all of the Metroids in a particular area, the level of lava decreases, allowing for entry into the next area. That's essentially the entire structure of this game. You enter an area, search for and destroy all of the Metroids, and then you proceed into the next area to do the same, all while locating power-ups to help you along the way. Alright, time to get into the problems. Now, I'm not against the idea of linear gameplay in Metroid games. Zero Mission, Fusion, and Prime 3 are all fairly linear games that have you performing a set task in order to reach the next area. And then when you have the right gear, you can then go back to explore older areas to find optional power-ups to better prepare yourself for later, or simply for the purposes of collecting everything. While Metroid helped make popular the non-linear style that it's known for, linear gameplay in Metroid can still work just as well, I think, as long as it's fun to play. And I think that's what my biggest issue is with Metroid II. I don't think it's very fun to play. First of all, the environments in this game are horribly uninteresting to look at, and a lot of areas start to blend in after a while. Now, the original Metroid had that problem as well in a few instances, but nothing compared to this. It's all just underground caves with barely anything to help tell them apart. Yeah, the NES game was underground as well, but each area at least had elements to help differentiate them and to help identify where you were. Here, there's barely any of that. And yes, I realize that this game is on the Game Boy, but there are other Game Boy games that look so much better than this, such as the Mario and Wario Land games. And maybe it isn't fair to compare two platforming games to an adventure game, but my point being that this just isn't a very nice game to look at even by Game Boy standards. The lack of visual variety I find makes this game more of a chore to go through, and I could see someone potentially getting lost because no area really stands out with a rare few exceptions. And like before, there isn't a map of any kind, so I have to say, use a map on your phone or PC because without one, I find this game more tedious to play through than the original because of its dull environment. And secondly, the Metroids. Not counting the Queen, there are 5 Metroid types that you'll encounter in this game. Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, Omega, and Original Metroids. And as far as boss type enemies are concerned, if you can even call them that, this is all you get. Metroid may have only had 3 bosses, but at least they were all different. In this game, you're killing the same types of Metroids multiple times until you've killed them all. Even then, the only 2 Metroid types I'd consider bosses at all are Zeta and Omega Metroids. Alpha and Gamma Metroids don't take that many hits to kill and they really don't do anything. All they really do is just run into you. Zeta Metroids are easily the most aggressive types because they not only try to ram into you, but they also shoot fire fairly frequently, so I consider these ones among the most dangerous types. And Omega Metroids are less aggressive, but they take much longer to kill. And then the original Metroids once again require the Ice Beam and 5 missiles. And I'm not sure if I was doing something wrong or not, but I found the Metroid Queen pretty difficult to defeat. I mean, it was my first time fighting the thing, but still, I found this boss difficult. And this and the Omega Metroids are pretty much why you want as many missile tanks as possible because you'll need a lot of them to defeat these enemies. Now, if there were more boss enemies to fight and a few less Metroids or something, I would have had less of an issue with this, but again, this is all you're doing and it gets really old really fast. The first few encounters are somewhat thrilling, I guess, because we hadn't seen Metroids like this before, but once you encounter one for the 10th time, it gets boring. For the most part, Samus herself controls fairly well, which is great, but the rest of the game just falls flat for me. I can't even say much for the soundtrack this time because there really isn't one. The only piece of music in this game that's memorable to me is the surface of SR388. It's a good piece, it's just a shame you don't hear it much and that you don't hear much of anything in this game. Now, I don't know if it was because of Game Boy memory limitations or if they felt that the lack of music would enhance the atmosphere, but to me, the lack of music really deflates the experience. It makes an already dull and at times lifeless game feel even more lifeless. Alright, I know I've been pretty negative throughout this review, but honestly, this game just doesn't do anything for me. Planet SR388 wasn't anywhere near as fun to travel through as Planet Zebes. Either of them. The Metroids get really boring to fight after a while, the environments are extremely dull, and the lack of music does nothing to enhance this game's atmosphere. In fact, I think it actually takes away from it. Samus herself is fun to control, and the new power-ups are awesome and would go on to become series mainstays. But the problems in this game were just too numerous for me to really enjoy them. This is a game I went into with an open mind because, like the first game, I hadn't really played it. But unlike that game, I left this one feeling disappointed. This game does a lot of things right, but it does a lot of things wrong at the same time. I mean, I'm glad I played and beat this game at the very least, but because of how dull everything felt, I can safely say that I have no desire to replay this game anytime soon. To me, there's just really nothing here, and I hate having to say that, but that's what I feel. I like what this game does right, and I'm glad that many of these things would return in the future. But the issues I have with this game prevent it from being very enjoyable to me. But perhaps the next game on our list will bring that enjoyment. Next time we meet, we're revisiting SR388, and hopefully it's a much better experience. Next time, we're taking a look at Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS. Until then, take care everyone.